Hello and welcome to the first episode of Straight Talk. My name is Steven Barhorst and I will be your moderator. To the right, I have my more conservative host, JP Remages, and to the left, I have my more left-wing host, Charlie Convery. With that said, let's get right into the topics. Now, the first topic that we have was the presidential debate that happened I believe it was a week ago. It was at Hofstra University, and it was moderated by NBC nightly news anchor Lester Holt. Much ado was made about the debate itself, but I'll leave that for you to decide. JP, what did you think about the debate?
I think that most people would agree, and this is certainly how I saw it, is that Hillary Clinton won. And I wouldn't necessarily say that she blew him away because she performed so well. I think that Trump just underperformed to such an extent that it made her look like she was that much of a stronger candidate, because he had his moments where he was certainly doing a good job and he was bringing up good points. In the beginning, he talked about he's going to cut taxes from 35 to 15% for both small and big businesses, thus creating plenty of jobs and economic growth, which I certainly agree with. But then once you got to see about like a half an hour or so into it, he was just tired and he started doing the more personal, not factually supported broad attacks that you saw in the primary debates. And Hillary stayed pretty much the same, calling for the progressive agenda of debt-free college, paid family leave, and having the wealthy pay for it by increasing taxes. So nothing really changed from either of the candidates in their approach to debating, which I think is not exactly what their camps were looking for them to broaden the base of attraction from the undecided candidates.
All right. I mean, I strongly agree. I think Hillary definitely came out on top in this debate. She had Trump kind of on the defense the entire time, which I had not really seen before. Trump just constantly trying to defend himself and even like trying to interrupt her to make her seem kind of like not knowing what she was talking about. I think that he also kind of fell for her trap. She did purposely like make statements that he would then fall for, and she had the backup, like with the Iraq War. She had the quote that he said. She caught him on it, and he interrupted her. He said like wrong multiple times, which made him look just kind of like big and bogus. I think she had good points too. I had never really heard a one-on-one debate between them, and I find myself once again agreeing much more with Hillary than Trump. And also like with economic plans, she stated multiple times that he doesn't have an economic plan that would really work, and she called him out and he didn't really have a defense. And then again with ISIS, she stated that he didn't have like a plan to combat it, and he was like, oh, it's secret. But I would like to hear that at least to see like what kind of idea besides bomb their families. That's what he said.
I can respect that he wants to he said, oh well, you're letting our enemies know what you're doing,
them know,
which I can respect. But at the same time, like you can't just say like Ted Cruz that we're gonna carpet bomb ISIS and that's gonna be your strategy. Like there's got to be somewhat of a plan there, and and this has kind of been consistent with most of what he's done is he's kind of put out the headline for what he wants to do, but he doesn't really say how he's going to do it.
And he had the same kind of defensive lines over and over of like, oh, you're telling the enemy what we're going to do, but it's like, that's not really a good comeback, Trump. And he used it like 5 or 6 times on her.
And I think that my economic policies certainly, especially with the taxes, I certainly side more with Trump. But I think in his trade policy, I just typically conservative, the agenda and the belief has been in free trade, and Trump is very not free trade.
He's
talking
NAFTA.
about
NAFTA's
tariffs.
The worst.
We're going to tax everything that comes in from China. We're going to tax Mexican imports, and I don't think that's necessarily feasible. Just if anybody that's studied economics will understand that if Mexico's better at producing cars and America's better at producing corn, then we'll each specialize in those two departments and trade with each other, and we'll both be better off. I don't think it's necessarily an easy argument to put out there because economics is a very difficult field to understand, and the idea of saying, yes, giving Mexico more jobs in this department, that's not an easy pill to swallow for a lot of Americans, especially if you're out of work. But I think it's while it might not be an easy pill to swallow, it's one that definitely needs to be put out there more, because I haven't even heard Hillary combat that claim often. It's mostly just been like, well, when I was, the first lady and my husband negotiated these trade policies, it was good. And she hasn't really, said herself that she's, contrasting Trump's tariff policies.
He did. Trump did have a good tactic, though, of he could blame any political misstep in the last decade or so on her as she is the politicians who failed to act. And I thought that was a really good card that he did play throughout the debate. He was like, that's because you didn't act, or that you voted for it. And he can definitely just call her back and be like, look, you didn't that didn't work out and you voted for it. And I think that was a good card to play.
He definitely did hold back a little bit. I was kind of surprised that he didn't necessarily bring up all the scandals.
He did bring up the emails, though.
He brought up the emails.
And I think
it was about once in the entire
Yeah, no, he brought it up once
when
when she brought up his tax returns. And I think she actually handled it kind of well. She was kind of out front with it, and as soon as he said that, I kind of cringed because I thought, oh, this is going to be a little ugly. Yeah. But I think she handled it well. She's like, yes, it was a mistake. Yes, I shouldn't have done it. And he's like, yeah, it was a mistake. And she's like, yeah, I acknowledge that. But then she kind of brought up the tax returns, and then he got a little flustered.
Yeah,
when again back on the defensive as he done for the entire debate.
All right, well, sorry to interrupt such a spirited conversation, but we got to get to our next topic, which actually involves someone who is not in the debate. This is Libertarian presidential candidate Gary Johnson, who has been at, the center of a few political mishaps. First, he went on NBC's Morning Joe in front of Mike Barnicle, and Mike Barnicle asked him about the situation in Aleppo. Gary Johnson replied, "What is Aleppo?" He then went on an interview with NBC's Chris Matthews, where he asked Gary Johnson, well, who is your favorite foreign leader? Gary Johnson could not name a foreign leader. He has been endorsed by the Chicago Tribune, the first third-party candidate that they have ever endorsed. And Chicago Tribune has remained slightly apolitical, their leanings. They haven't endorsed too many people. But here's the real kicker. His vice presidential candidate, William Weld, the former Massachusetts governor, Gary Johnson is the former New Mexico governor. Bill Weld has been the epicenter of a new rumor in which he will drop out of the presidential race and endorse Hillary Clinton for president. Charlie, what do you think about these few?
I think it's really hurting his campaign because the only news titles or news lines that I've heard about him is him messing up about these incidents, and it's definitely not helping with rumors of his vice president supposedly dropping out and then supporting his opponent. I think we can't really have a president who can't name a single foreign leader or even knows what Aleppo is. And he did kind of joke about it. He's like, oh, I'm having an Aleppo moment. But it's like, yeah, but how many of those can you have? Especially, and you can't have Aleppo moments when you're the president. You have to know what you're talking about. You need to know who the opposition and your allies are, especially foreign.
And Trump has certainly had those moments himself. But when you're the Libertarian candidate versus the Republican candidate, there's so much more room for error for Donald Trump. And we've seen that over and over again with his gaffes that he's had, whether it's talking about Rosie O'Donnell and women or, banning all Muslims from entering our country, which is another topic in and of itself. But you've seen Donald Trump screw up and trip over his own words and then come out later and say, well, I didn't mean it like that, I meant it like this. Gary Johnson's walking on thin ice as it is. He doesn't have the affordability to come back and later say, well, I should have known this was what Aleppo was and this was what's going on, and I should have been able to name the leader of England and the United Kingdom. But it's just he's so and he was doing so well for a long time. I think just because many Americans were looking for an alternate option with our two gems of candidates that we've got this year.
Oh, they're perfect.
But he's certainly shooting himself in the foot recently, especially considering that he was looking to get on the debate stage next time around, and I don't think he's getting himself anywhere.
Well, you did say that there was a separate bar. The margin of success for Gary Johnson right now is that he needs to get to 5%. What this 5% will do is it'll allow the Libertarian Party to gain federal funding, it'll gain ballot access, and it'll get more name recognition as a federally put out as a major party. Is 5% even possible at this point?
I'm really starting to question it for him. I mean, he's walking on thin ice. He just doesn't really seem to have the backing or the momentum. And I mean, he's really scraping the bottom of the bucket here, just trying to get in. And I think even if he gets in, it's not enough to try to take down one of the two big candidates.
I mean, you'd think it'd be easy because from the polls that I've looked at, Jill Stein has been polling at 2-3% total throughout the process. And Gary Johnson's been as high as I think 9 or 10 in some polls. But at this point, if he continues to do this, and I've even talked to some people that are libertarians themselves who aren't exactly enthused by Gary Johnson. He's, his website talking about an immigration plan is not as simple as amnesty, and it's not as simple as building a wall, but it doesn't really elaborate further than that. he's discounting obviously Trump's policy of we're going to build a wall and Mexico's going to pay for it. And Hillary Clinton and the Obama administration have been very out there in saying that we want a pathway to citizenship or legal status. And that's kind of a recurring trend in a lot of where he stands, is it's not exactly clear, because everybody knows like libertarians are typically like, we don't want government involved in your personal life, we don't want them, lower taxes, lower government spending, but if he's got to make himself known for something, whether or not you agree with Trump, people know him from saying build the wall, make America great again, and to whatever merit those catchphrases may have, they're catchy. They're catchy, and people know him for it. And Gary Johnson just does not have that.
And I think he definitely could be playing the middle ground a lot farther. I mean, yes, I know he's libertarian, but I mean, he could be like that third party that people are really looking for if they're not satisfied with either candidates, which I know many Americans aren't. I think he could have been like a kind of third option that people might have turned to, and he's really kind of dropped the ball in that aspect.
Yeah.
All right. Well, now we're going to move on to one of the children of one of the candidates. That's Donald Trump Jr., who a few weeks ago posted a picture to Twitter. It was a tweet in which he likened the Syrian refugee crisis. There's another Aleppo callback. He likened the situation in Syria with the refugees to a bowl of Skittles, in which for every few Skittles, more than a few, there would be one poisoned Skittle, which could possibly kill you, is what the picture said. Many are citing very, very harsh criticism. Skittles themselves had to come back with a public statement to this issue. JP, what is your thoughts on the Skittles comparison?
When I heard about this, it's kind of funny for me because this is an analogy that I've liked to use, and obviously I don't expect Skittles to come out and say, well, yes, we do poison one in every 6 Skittles.
Yeah.
And I mean, that was kind of just,
never know.
I don't know. But anyways, I'd like to think it's at least comparable. Obviously, like I said, Skittles are not poisoned, and in a situation arising, it's merely for visualization purposes. But the Washington Post had an article where they described a situation where there were 198 refugees coming across the Mediterranean Sea, and they landed on a Greek island. 4 of those Syrian refugees were planted by ISIS. 2 of those refugees were involved in the planning of the Paris attacks. And 4 out of 198, that comes out to roughly 2%. And assuming that 2% of the 10,000 refugees that the Obama administration would like to bring in, assuming that just 2% of those are affiliated with ISIS, that's 200 terrorists among those refugees. And I'm not saying that we should ban all people of the Muslim faith from entering our country, but I do think that it's at least worthwhile to explore an option where we're not just straight up saying we're going to take in thousands and thousands of people from the most unstable region in the world, especially considering that a top ISIS commander was quoted in saying, "We have sent many operatives to Europe with the refugees. Some of our brothers have fulfilled their mission, but others are still waiting to be activated." And 200 out of millions and millions of people in the United States might not seem like a large number, but when just 7 refugees out of the thousands that are in Europe were able to pull off Paris, and then you saw something else come up in Nice when they drove the truck into the crowd, killing around 80 people. 2% is not a large number, but when you compare that with millions and millions of people, that gets to be a larger number than you would expect. And I think that it's at least worth exploring until we can come up with a serious process from understanding where these people come from and what their intentions are. And that's not exactly an easy thing to do, but it's at least worth exploring to put a moratorium on, bringing in people from the Middle East.
Yeah. I this analogy of the Skittles kind of troubles me. I don't like representing, human beings as candies meant for children. And while I do understand where it's coming from, and it does make sense, I don't think that is enough reason to ban all refugees from entering the United States. I mean, it's kind of our duty as an international leader and as a global, kind of policemen, we've been called multiple times, it is kind of our responsibility to take in refugees. I mean, there's international laws stating that most countries should have a ratio when there is a conflict with mass exodus or refugees, that we should take them in. And just because, we're afraid of a few, we shouldn't just shut our doors completely. We should have like the vetting process to actually look at these refugees and make sure that they are safe so that they can have a nice home and then, of course, eventually return to the area to help rebuild when it does end. I don't think that we should, just because a couple Skittles are bad doesn't mean you should throw out the whole bowl. If there's a chance to actually identify which ones are bad, you should be able to pick them out and save the rest of the Skittles. I mean, these are human lives. We shouldn't just let them stay in the area of conflict, or like what we're doing now, if we don't let them in, is just shift our problems onto Europe, because they are actually keeping their doors open, at least most of the countries like Germany, even though they are experiencing problems. I do commemorate them in at least trying to help. That we shouldn't just shift our problems to the rest of the world and kind of ignore it as the United States. I think it's our duty to help our allies and help the rest of the world and show that we do actually care for people and we're not just totally like isolated and only care for ourselves.
And I think that Germany, and it's obviously well intentioned when you have the open door refugee policy, but that's probably the problem, the main issue with why Germany has been seeing so many attacks. I mean, in July, you saw a refugee attack a woman with an axe on a train, and ISIS later claimed responsibility for it. You saw the attack in out west just about a week or so ago, where there was a shooting, and ISIS did again claim responsibility for it. And again with the Minnesota Mall incident, ISIS claimed well, they're not responsible for it, and these people aren't necessarily refugees, but you're seeing an expanded influence of ISIS around the world when they're not even having main headquarters per se in these countries. And like I said, it's not so simple to say we're going to ban everyone or we're going to let everybody in. Nothing is that simple, but I don't think that it's a good idea to go the Germany route of just we're going to have open doors and bring them all in. We need to have some sort of middle ground.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, well, we will move on to some more popular culture news. During the NFL preseason, San Francisco quarterback Colin Kaepernick sat down during the national anthem during a preseason game with the Green Bay Packers, which has sparked a wide variety of reactions from, more impassioned, opposed reactions to even some other athletes sitting down during the national anthem. Megan Rapinoe, a soccer player for the U.S. women's national team, sat down. Jeremy Lane, a cornerback for the Seattle Seahawks, sat down during the anthem. And Brandon Marshall, middle linebacker for the Denver Broncos, not to be confused with former Chicago Bears wide receiver Brandon Marshall, who is a wide receiver for the Jets, also sat down. Charles, what do you have to say about this?
I think it is their right to stand or not stand, and obviously they're sitting for a reason to bring attention to the cause that they're sitting for, and there is a problem in this country, and I believe that most of it is relating back to Black Lives Matter, if I'm correct, and I feel that it is a problem that needs to be exposed even more and should be solved, and if this is another way to kind of bring attention to it, I think it should be utilized. I know they're not forced to stand, and they shouldn't be pressured to stand just because they support or don't support a cause. They should sit if they have a reason to, and that they shouldn't just be pressured to stand and just kind of go with the masses.
I have developed more respect for Colin Kaepernick and his approach as time has gone on. Initially when I saw it, you get the alert on your phone saying, Colin Kaepernick sits for the national anthem in the preseason game, and initially kind of freaked out, whatever, this guy hates America, yada, yada, yada. You hear it all the time from, pundits all over the place, but my main problem with what he did was how he handled it. He said initially, and I'm just going off of memory here, that I can't stand for a flag that represents a country that is constantly oppressing an entire race of people. And I think going as far to say that I can't stand for this flag and what it represents, that is where my main issue was, and I think that's where a lot of people's main issue was, because by saying that that the American flag does not stand for something good, that is an issue for me, because certainly may not be perfect, but when you look around the world, you have far more opportunities in America to do what you want, follow your passion. And I mean, this is a guy that's making millions of dollars playing a sport, not to discredit the talents and the hard work that these people put into their sport, but
he's been doing the right thing ever since then, and saying, you know, he's going to contribute money back to the community. His jersey sales are going back to the communities. I take a larger issue with what Megan Rapinoe did, in the sense that she is a member of the United States women's national soccer team. She's not representing a private club. She's not representing herself. She's representing her country. And I think when you're representing your country, you have a totally different obligation. I think you should stand for the national anthem when you are representing the United States of America. I mean, just this last weekend, you saw at the Ryder Cup, you have a team of 12 people all standing for the national anthem from all over the world. And people from Europe, even Team Europe, they stood and they respected. And during the Olympics, Usain Bolt was getting interviewed, and in the middle of his interview, they started to play the national anthem. He stopped, stayed silent while the national anthem was being played. I mean, we have people representing their own countries, not even from the United States, giving more respect to the anthem, more respect to the flag than our own citizens. And when you're representing yourself in a private organization, you have every right to do what you want, and I recognize that and I respect that, because that's what America's about. It's beautiful that you can, you know, be so controversial and still exercising your right at the same time. Mm-hmm. But when you're representing your country, I think you have a different duty, and that duty is to stand.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I feel like his initial response really flopped. I feel like he should not have gone that route. I feel like he had the chance to actually bring a lot of attention to it, and he actually turned it not really on the cause of why he said, but against the flag and what the country stands for. And especially like what you said, in when you're representing your country, it is more about showing that we can be united even if there are issues within our country, and that even people from other countries stand and respect it, because, you know, it's out of simple dignity. Mm-hmm. And it's a completely different ballgame if you're on an international scale versus a private club or enterprise.
Especially you see like players on I think it was the Seahawks opening week, they all stood conjoining arms on the sidelines during the national anthem. That to me is far more powerful than, you know, one individual or two individuals sitting on the sidelines, because you're saying, we have problems in this country, and we all recognize that, but we're not going to do it, and we're not going to get anywhere by bickering and by alienating ourselves from these issues and just further dividing ourselves. And that's something I think this probably political environment that we have in this election cycle, we need to be far more unifying than divisive, and that's something that our candidates this year have kind of struggled to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and on that note, we will shift to a more legislative eye. Last month, the U.S. House of Representatives overturned a veto by President Barack Obama on a bill allowing the families of 9/11, the families of the victims of 9/11, to sue the country of Saudi Arabia over their alleged involvement in the terrorist attack. And this allegation involves rumors that Saudi Arabia funded the attack and allowed Osama bin Laden's agents to get access to training and equipment and everything by use of funding. JP, what do you think?
I think the far more powerful statement was the fact that it was overridden by Congress. I mean, you have a president here who has never had a veto of his override for the entire 7 or 8 years that he's been in office, and I think that the message that was sent by Democrats and Republicans alike in Congress to come together, and especially in this time of division, to say this is something we all believe in, this is something we should all feel passionate about, because, you know, evidence about, you know, how involved Saudi Arabia was in the attacks, I'm not exactly sure how extensive it is or, you know, how concrete it is, but that's the beauty of the court system, is when you bring something to trial, you have to bring out the strongest evidence that you have, and you know, reaping the benefits of the ability to get your fair trial. And if there was any wrongdoing on the part of Saudi Arabia, I don't see why they shouldn't be able to seek reparations, because it was arguably the worst terrorist attack and most notable terrorist attack, not only in the United States but around the world in the last 50 years or even a century, probably since Pearl Harbor. And if there is a nation that we consider to be an ally in probably the most unstable region in the world, then I think it's absolutely worth exploring for these families that, you know, they lost so much that day, and I'd hate to see them, you know, miss an opportunity to get some closure.
Mm-hmm. I think that the real issue for me is that I don't see the connection between the terrorist attack and the country of Saudi Arabia. I mean, Osama bin Laden was from Saudi Arabia. They exiled him for being too radical as an extremist. He snuck his way back in. They tried to kill him multiple times, and then he fled. I don't see that. I don't know why they would fund him, and also that afterwards, the terrorist attack, when the United States went in, Saudi Arabia is one of our only allies in that and in the Gulf War. And actually, most of the issues that arise today were from us inside Saudi Arabia after they allowed us to come in. I don't know why they would cause an attack to bring us in, then get angry at us for being inside their country. As for Congress overriding, I mean, that is obviously in their ability, and I think it's great to see it used. But I don't see the connection between the actual attacks and the government of Saudi Arabia. I feel like it's only going to severely worsen our relationship with Saudi Arabia, as they are one of our few allies in the Middle East and one of our strongest. And I feel like it would just only hurt relations. I mean, obviously it is great that if the families can find closure, that they can find it in this lawsuit. But I just don't know how sturdy it will stand against the Saudi government, or if there is really any connection.
Well, I have faith in the court system, and I think if there is any connection there that's worth, reparations, then I think the court will find that and hopefully bring an end to a very traumatic chapter for these families.
Yeah, well, others point to more the practicality of these families being able to demand reparations, because this doesn't go through a U.S. court, this goes through international jurisdiction. Yeah. So others argue that it's too impractical, and that the only reason why we're pushing it along is to stick it to Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, and you don't see international lawsuits against us if a drone strike goes wrong or if we accidentally harm civilians, and that is directly caused by the U.S. government. There's video footage of it, we know we did it, and you don't really see many international lawsuits. When it's through a terrorist organization to a government that may or may not support them, and we're still trying to sue when you don't even see when there is a direct connection, and it's proven many lawsuits. I mean, I just think it's interesting. I do want to see what the court finds, and I want to stick to it to see where it goes, to see if anything actually does come about of it.
I agree. I think in my perspective, it's worth exploring, because, at the very least, they're going to find that there's nothing there, and then, my guess would be that there would be an initial trial from one or two families, and then that would save the trouble from many others down the road. Because, but I don't know. I think it's definitely an opportunity that I would hate to see passed up, because the least it can do, the worst I think it could do, is that Saudi Arabia wins in court against the American families, and there's nothing there.
Yeah.
So I think it's at least worth bringing up.
Yeah, I agree. I think at the very worst, they just won't find any connection.
Yeah.
All right, and that will do it for the first episode of Straight Talk. My name is Steven Barhorst, JP Remages, Charlie Convery. So glad that we could be with you. We hope to see you again next week.